What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 30 preview. So you're going to go through some of your key questions and topics ahead of blank Game Week 30, kicking off with Leicester players. A lot of people ask me about this. They are playing on Thursday in Europe, and I know there's still Premier League games to go, but it's a Friday deadline. There ain't enough time to wait to cover everything just on Friday. So we're going to talk about them now. And the reason that a lot of people ask me is because they play this week against Brentford at home. It's a blank game week, but they have a fixture, and they have a double game week in game week 33, and they still have extra fixtures to rearrange as well. So usually that's a good formula for bringing in an FPL player. Like a lot of us recently have gone for like Spurs players, Arsenal players, etc., because they've had a double and they also play in the blank game week. So I can see why people are looking at it, but there's just a lot of problems with Leicester in that they haven't necessarily played that well this season, especially from a defensive point of view. They've also got Europe as well. That game on Thursday, they're already 2-0 up on aggregate. So if they go through, they're then going to prioritise Europe. So if those European games come in and around other game weeks, there could be rotation. And the game on Thursday might give us some indication of who Brendan Rodgers thinks is his first choice 11. But that doesn't mean those players are just going to keep on playing, right? So for example, a lot of us would like, Daka or Iheanacho if they were completely nailed. And if one of them starts on Thursday, you might assume their first choice. That doesn't mean the other one can't start against Brentford or can't start against Man United or Palace. And you kind of see the issues. For me right now, Barnes is probably the best Leicester option. I feel like he's the most nailed attacker as it stands. Maddison usually would be up there as well, but Maddison has had some injury concerns recently. And if you look at his recent minutes, he played 90 against Arsenal. He didn't play against Leeds. Only 18 minutes against Burnley. 16 minutes against Wolves. Now, he might be back up to more of a fitness level where he can consistently play. But I do think around European games, they're going to prioritise that. And if Maddison needs any kind of a rest, it's probably going to be in the league. It's different to kind of Man City and Chelsea right now. We've got bigger squads and stuff like that, more squad depth, and have to keep playing in the league because they're, Man City and Liverpool in particular, because they're fighting for the title and have Europe. Leicester don't really have a hell of a lot to play for in the league. Obviously, there's a lot of money as you start moving up places, but I think getting that European trophy is probably the priority right now. So even Maddison, I'm not sure you could bring him in this week for the Brentford fixture and then still hope by game week 33 that he basically plays back-to-back games. So I think Barnes is more likely, but even Barnes I think is a little bit of a risk, right? And then you look at the defenders, and this is where the problems really start for me, because Fofana's back, right? According to a tweet I saw before I started recording, he's going to be in the squad for the European game, right? Now, I don't think he's going to start. He's been out for so long, but at some point, Brendan Rodgers needs to start getting him minutes. He is probably their best centre-back. And then you've got Johnny Evans, who is also really good, but has been missing out a bunch because of injuries, right? And he could be back, according to FPL, the 2nd of April. So that would be game week 31. Even if he's not fully fit for that game, as long as there's no more injury reoccurrences, he could start getting minutes as well. Now, let's say that he's out for a little while and Fofana comes back. The problem is he's going to get some minutes, but he's not going to be nailed on enough to have him in your team. You're always going to be worried for a player that's been out for that long, right? Pretty much for the whole season. But he is going to take the minutes of either Amati or Soyuncu. Now, my assumption would be that Amati misses out, Soyuncu is the better defender. But when I put a tweet out this morning, kind of trying to get Leicester fans to tell me whether I'm right or wrong about my Leicester opinions, especially for defenders, there wasn't really a consensus on whether Amati or Soyuncu would miss out, because Amati's been playing well, according to them. And so a bunch of them assumed that Soyuncu would keep playing, but it's not guaranteed. So even if you went for Soyuncu, he's not necessarily nailed, and neither's Amati. Now, Amati's only 3.9 million, so you could go for him, hope he keeps his place. If he doesn't, you let him rot away on the bench. But you've still used a transfer to do that. I don't think stopping yourself from having triple Leicester is going to be an issue. I don't think that's the problem. But he's taken up a defender spot. And if you're looking at the likes of maybe you've got Doherty or Reguilon, you've got Trent, you might want to get Cancelo back, or you want to keep him, Reece James, Rudiger. There's lots of good defenders you could bring in. Do you really want to have Amati taking up one of the spots? Maybe that's different if you've used your bench boost. If you haven't, probably not, right? And then you look at the fullbacks, okay? So I think the problem is just carry on. So Pereira, I'm sure, is first choice right back. I don't really have any concerns over that. I do have concerns over his fitness, though. So He played 290 minutes in game week 25-26. Then only 45 against Burnley. Missed Leeds. Then he plays Arsenal. He comes off on 60 minutes. Presumably, I mean, they were losing, but I don't think you bring him off, right? He's a good defender. Presumably, that's fitness issues. And they got a game on Thursday. He's probably going to play that. Is he then definitely going to play against Brentford? I don't know. And the problem is, Justin is now back fit, and he's not played many minutes this season, but he can play right back and left back. So then the problem comes with Luke Thomas. Okay, he's been playing left back quite consistently. He might keep his place. He might remain first choice for the rest of the season, but he's played so many minutes recently. Could Justin play left back as he did last season? To take some minutes off Thomas? I think he probably can. And then it all comes back to the point that Leicester defence just hasn't been good. And if the counter argument is, well, we're going to get some of our first choice centre-backs back, or first choice defenders back, like Castagna could be back soon before the double game week in game week 33 as well. That's another fullback that can play left back or right back. And that might make Leicester defence better, but it makes none of the players kind of nailed on. So I just don't see Leicester defence as a good option this week. If Amati keeps his place, or you bring in Soyuncu and he keeps his place, then great. But Soyuncu's 4.9 million for a Leicester defender, or in a Leicester team that just haven't kept many clean sheets. So I just see nothing but issues with Leicester defenders. I think Daka and Iheanacho, I'm not even sure Leicester fans could tell you who's first choice or who's going to start against Brentford and who's going to start in Europe. And so for me, Barnes is the only one, because I feel like he's kind of proved his fitness recently more than Maddison. And I think Barnes, Maddison, obviously Vardy, when they're all fully fit, are usually first choice and fairly nailed. So Barnes would be the one for me if you really want a Leicester player this week. But elsewhere, I think you've got genuine concerns over who starts this week. And even if you're not concerned about that, by game week 33, you probably will be. So unless you really need the numbers, I think I'd mostly avoid Leicester this week. And try and give yourself a bit more information after game week 30, closer to 33. Bearing in mind they have more double game weeks afterwards. If there's someone that is playing week in, week out, proving their fitness, maybe they're out of Europe or whatever it might be, then they might be options. I'm not saying we disregard them for the rest of the season, but this week, it's difficult to choose one. So obviously I covered this a little bit in yesterday's video, but question come in, are there any Burnley or Everton players that are genuinely worth considering for game week 31? So right now you don't need to worry about this, I guess, because neither of them play in game week 30, so you're probably not going to bring them in unless they're enabling another move, but I'd find that unlikely for most people. So I'm just going to cover this briefly. My overall answer right now, my opinion might change by game week 31, is not really. I'm a big fan of double game weeks. I do like having like a couple of players every time there's a double. I like captain and a double game week player, but even I am going to find it difficult not to just captain Salah against Watford at home. If Salah is a doubt for whatever reason against Watford, then maybe I'd put it on an Everton attacker or a Burnley attacker, but even then the options are so limited, it's really difficult. I really think from Burnley the only two you're looking at is Pope and Weghorst. I think you could go for an outfield defender like Tarkowski or something like that, but I think Nick Pope is just the best defensive asset from Burnley. And also, again, like I said just a minute ago, there's a lot of good defenders we should not ignore, like Chelsea defenders, Man City defenders, especially when Man City are in a proper title race with Liverpool. And obviously Trent, Robertson, these are all really good options. So I don't know if I'd want an outfield Burnley player. I still think Weghorst is okay because none of the forwards are really lighting it up right now. Maybe if you've got Kane and Lacazette, it's probably difficult to also have Weghorst as well. But if you're someone like me who's gone for Son, then having Lacazette and Weghorst as your front two probably isn't the end of the world. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, Man City's the extra fixture, it's not really a double game week. I get that. But if it's an attacker, you've got appearance points at least to add on to whatever they get against Everton. And then they got Norwich, then they got another double game week as well. So there are extra fixtures there. I'm not saying they're amazing players. I'm not saying they're necessarily better than, targeting Cancelo or James or Rudiger if you don't own them. But I think it's worth considering. And for me, it's a downgrade. It's Jimenez to Weghorst. So not only does it get me 2 extra fixtures in game week 31 to 33, it also gets me more money to spend. So I actually think Weghorst is okay. And I think Nick Pope's the only other one I'll consider right now. And from Everton, it's tricky, right? What's going on with Calvert-Lewin? Again, we'll see the game on Thursday night to find out who's available, who's fit. But Gray, Townsend, Gordon, they're all competing for very similar spots. Richarlison's in there off the left as well, unless he plays up front. If he plays up front, Calvert-Lewin's probably missing out, unless Lampard starts playing with both of them up front. But then that means that where Gray, Townsend and Gordon play all get messed up as well. I just wouldn't want an Everton defender outside of maybe Pickford. But even that is pushing it. I'd rather have Nick Pope, I think. So yeah, overall, not too many players. I think Gordon, because he's an enabler, possibly. Like, he's only 4.5 million. You could just stick him in for the doubles when you need him. Otherwise, he's just taking some money out of your squad. But ultimately, I think that's it. Right now, it might change before Game Week 31. It might change after seeing Everton on Thursday. But there ain't many players to consider right now. And obviously, you don't have to get them that week. They've got other double game weeks to come. You could get them closer to those if you really needed them. Okay, so question about hits this week, right? For Game Week 30, obviously a lot of people are missing players. Is there any upside to taking a hit just to bring in... So this is specifically about Son or Kane for Game Week 30 only. So my first thought is, why does it have to be Game Week 30 only? Because they got pretty good fixtures, 31, 32, 33. Maybe you're looking at doing the Salah hokey cokey, right? So you're taking Salah out to fund one of these two and then bringing Salah back in, right? Fair enough if that's if that's what you're doing. Now, usually a hit for 1 week... Well, obviously, you really need it to pay off that week and big, because you're then using another transfer to get rid. So usually my opinion is no. But if we look at the fixtures for this week, you've got to think about captaincy. And again, Leicester versus Brentford could be decent. Tony versus Leicester could be okay. But I don't think you're going to want to captain any of them. Bowen's probably going to be out. Antonio might be missing. You're not going to captain them against Spurs. Arsenal or Villa, Coutinho, Saka, Lacazette, maybe. Ultimately, my point is, Spurs players, Kane and Son specifically, are the standout captains this week, I would say. And that is what most people are going to do. They're either going to captain Kane if they own him, or they're going to captain Son if they don't, which is what I'm doing. And therefore, the hit is probably worth it just to get that captaincy in there, I would say. But ultimately, there's hardly any players this week, I think, are worth a hit if you're going to transfer them straight out. There's players you can definitely bring in, Arsenal players, maybe still Spurs players, even without the double, that are still going to see you good for the next couple of weeks, and they probably still are worth a transfer if you don't already own them. But for most other players, to take a hit and then get rid of them straight away, I probably wouldn't do it. Okay, so I had 2 questions around free hit that were quite similar, so I'm going to answer them together. So the first one was, how many players do we need this week to avoid using the free hit? And then I lazily used the same player images for which remaining game week do you think is best for the free hit, if not Game Week 30. I get the lack of upside and a likely low average score, but it pretty much guarantees extra points if you only have 6 to 8 players. I completely agree with that, by the way. I know some people absolutely smashed it in the double game week, right? Fair enough. Havertz, Coutinho, Reece James in Game Week 28. Like, some people will absolutely smash the free hit, and fair enough. But ultimately, the only real worry is how many extra points you get. So again, I've said this before, if you scored 130 using the free hit in a double game week, but your other team would have scored 115, you've only made 15 points, right? If you use it in a blank game week where you would have got 40, you end up getting 60, where you've made 20 points. It's not quite as simple as that, because obviously once you decide you're using a free hit, you make different transfers, but that's kind of just a basic overview. So we'll come back to that in a minute. This question first, how many players do we need? This always comes up, right? Quality is what you need to be thinking about. There's plenty of people that are going to go into this week with 7, 8, 9 players, okay? They're not going to get up to 10 or 11, and that's perfectly fine. Like, if I bring up my team for this week, for example, I've got 10 if Luka Dean misses out, which I'm sure he's going to, and that's fine, but I've got Rafinha against Saiss and Sarr. So if Rafinha scores, chances are Saiss and Sarr blank. So I'm only really getting the appearance points, which I'd be very happy with this week, but it's not the end of the world. So if you think about the players that people are going to have, most people are going to have Kane or Son. Some people will have both, but most are going to have Kane or Son. They're maybe going to have a Spurs defender. They're maybe going to have Kulusevski, maybe 2 or 3 Arsenal players. That's 6 players that are going to make up the bulk of most people's squads. Then there'll be the odd, obviously some people will be free hitting, fair enough. There'll be the odd kind of Wolves player around, maybe Jimenez, Coutinho, players like that. But I think 7 to 8 core players is probably all you really need. Having extra players is great, right? No one's saying you should actively look to not have them, but 7 to 8 is probably okay. The question obviously then comes, is there going to be a better week to use the free hit? Now, this is going to be very team and chip dependent, right? That boring answer as always. So Game Week 33 is a double game week, and Game Week 36 is also going to be a double game week. If you've got, say, 2 free hits and the wild card, then probably doing something like, and it's all going to depend how the fixtures end up falling with the FA Cup, but something like free hit this week, depending on how your team looks, free hit 33, and then wild card out of that in Game Week 34 to set up for the 36 bench boost is probably a good way of doing it. If you've only got 1 free hit, and even if you have, whether you've got a wild card or not, it's probably going to be easier to use that free hit in 33 or 36, because the chances are, like, if all the big teams win, like Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City in the FA Cup, they're probably more likely to have their big double in like game week 36. In game week 33, though, you might still want to get a bunch of extra players, like Man United players, for example. Yes, they play Liverpool, but they've also got Norwich. You could go for those Leicester players we talked about, Newcastle, etc. And you could just free hit them in and then not worry about having them for game week 36 or game week 34 to 36 because you've used your wildcard. And again, right now, I'm not 100% sure on whether the wildcard's best used in 31, 32 or 34. But ultimately, if you are going to wildcard at some point, then using one of your free hits in 33 or 36 probably looks good. So if you've got one and your team looks pretty good this week, I'd probably save it for one of those 2 weeks, unless you can work out a plan to get through both. But I think it looks tricky. If you've got two and you've got a wild card, then you could maybe just use... I think if you've got two, then you can probably get away with using one this week and just using one either in 33 or 36. But again, if you had like 9 to 10 core players, then you could just save them and use both in kind of 33 and 36. So it really depends how many chips you've got. But yeah, don't put a number on it. Just think about the actual players you got. Like if you've got, I don't know, like a Leeds defender, for example, they probably don't count as a great player this week. So that's how you got to think about it. So we talked about Leicester defenders earlier. Let's talk about Arsenal defenders, a team that is defending pretty well. And the best thing about Arsenal defenders is they're pretty much all nailed on. You know they're going to start week in, week out. They don't have FA Cup to worry about. They don't have Carabao Cup, obviously, that's finished. They don't have European matches. So they are playing pretty much every week. You don't have those concerns about players coming back from injury and stuff like that. So I do like Arsenal defenders. Now, they do have a game in game week 30. They don't have a guaranteed double in game week 33. They will definitely play Chelsea away that week. They'll only play Southampton away if Man City beat Southampton in the FA Cup. For what it's worth, if I was choosing between an Arsenal defender or a Leicester one this week, I would opt for the Arsenal one, even though there's no guarantee of the double in 33. Because like I said earlier, I just don't know which Leicester defender you'd even pick. And even then, I just don't think they're better than the Arsenal defenders. The fixtures afterwards are not great, but up until that point, they're okay. And like I said, they have been defending well. Now, I've put Tomiyasu on there because he is first choice, I would say. But obviously, Cedric's been playing a little while now. And Tomiyasu's just, it's one of those injuries where every week he's a doubt. And you never get a time frame, but every week he's still out. So Cedric may have played himself into the team. But my assumption would be when Tomiyasu's fit and able to play kind of week in, week out, he will come back into the team. And they haven't got, like I said, loads of other fixtures to worry about. It's only the double game weeks where they're going to have to play back-to-back at this point. But I wouldn't go for either of them, right? The best option defensively is arguably Ramsdale. So I'll just put out there first of all. But if you got a goalkeeper that you're happy with, which is perfectly fine, I don't own Ramsdale, I've got Tierney instead, then you start to look at the outfield players. So the question I think came in about, I'm thinking Ben White because he's nailed and cheap. I completely get that. I don't, like, Gabriel's goal threat is higher than Ben White's. And if you've got the spare cash, you could go for Gabriel. But to be honest, for 0.8 million, I'd be pretty tempted to go for White over Gabriel as well. I do like Tierney, which is why I own him. I think in the past, he has had fitness concerns, right? Which is why we've been a bit put off him. But again, not having to play all these extra matches is really helping. The problem right now is he does seem to be pegged back a little bit. I've heard other podcasts and stuff talk about that, Planet FPL, etc. Because Tomiyasu's not there, Tierney's having to have a bit more of a withdrawing role. But to be honest, against Leicester, he did get forward a little bit. It's nice to see him bombing up and down a bit more, like an Andy Robertson or, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Reece James, etc. But he did get forward a little bit. So if you've got the cash, I still just about prefer Tierney over Gabriel. I just don't know if it's worth paying that extra 0.2 million. But there's nothing wrong with Ben White. Ultimately, I really like Arsenal defenders. I think they're a good option to bring in this week ahead of Leicester players. I'd probably go Tierney if I had the money. If not, I'd probably just go for White and just save the money, right? Because if they don't get that double in 33, they're not quite as good. And Ben White's so cheap that you could just bench him. I think Tomiyasu's not an option. Cedric I wouldn't go for. And if you need a goalkeeper, Ramsdale looks pretty damn good too. There we go. I'll leave that one there. Hopefully that answered a bunch of your questions going into Game Week 30. If it did, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you are new around here. I don't know if there's going to be a video out tomorrow. It's St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, so probably not if I'm completely honest. But Friday morning, I'll have team selection. All the games will be finished. Hopefully, I'll have a clean sheet from Dubravka against Everton to add into my score. But I'll talk about my team on Game Week 30, what transfers I'm considering and stuff like that. And obviously, we'll have heard about we'll know what the Leicester result was in Europe as well, so we can talk about that. So plenty more content to come. Deadline stream on Friday as well. And obviously, during the break, we'll talk a lot more about kind of chip strategy, free hits, what fixtures will look like once all the FA Cup results are done and stuff like that as well. So thank you very much for watching. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and I will see you again soon.